Good evening, and welcome to Georgia Southwestern State University. I'm Professor Bonnie Levine Bergeron, and it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's Global South Lecture. This lecture series is named after and endowed by the late Professor Emeritus Harold Isaacs, who served as a history professor at Georgia Southwestern for 49 years. During his tenure at GSW, Professor Isaacs taught courses in Latin American history, African American history, established minors in Black Studies, and in Third World Studies. In 1981, he launched the Third World in Perspective seminar series, and 2 years later, he established the Association of Third World Studies. In 1984, the Journal of Third World Studies followed. This journal addressed problems and issues facing less developed countries all over the world. Following Professor Isaacs' death in 2015, the name of the journal was changed to the Journal of Global South Studies and is now published by the University of Florida on behalf of the now named Association of Global South Studies. As part of his bequest to GSW, Professor Isaacs requested that part of his monies be used each semester to bring a guest speaker to campus to talk to the campus community about issues and opportunities that are facing the Global South. Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jim Winchester. Dr. Winchester is a professor of philosophy and coordinator of the philosophy program at Georgia College and State University. He's the author of 4 books, one of which, Ethics in the Age of Savage Inequalities, deals with some of the issues that he will be speaking about tonight. He has been interested in the topic of migration for many years and has given several talks on it at scholarly conferences in Greece, Bulgaria, and in the United States. He also published an article on this topic as well, Refugees in an Age of Anger: Why the Developed World Should Help Clean Up the Messes that Have Led the Refugees to Flee, and how to welcome refugees without provoking a backlash. Welcome, Dr. Winchester.
Hear me? Great. Thanks very much for that kind introduction and for arranging this visit. I really appreciate that. And thank you all for coming. I've heard that your professors browbeat you and didn't give you much choice, at least in some cases of it, so I'm sorry for the torture that I've caused to rain down on you. But I hope that we can think about this really important issue tonight, and I'm interested in what you have to say about it. So they've asked me to speak for 45 minutes. That's a very long time to speak. And it's even harder to listen for 45 minutes. It's much harder to listen for 45 minutes than to talk for 45 minutes. So I'll definitely keep to the allotted time and maybe stop a little early because I want to leave plenty of time for discussion. So I come here tonight to speak about the problem of migration. But in a better world, there would be no problem of migration. People would move about as they've always done since the beginning of time on this planet. And they'd come to new places, and the people who are natives there, they would welcome the people. They'd help these people who migrated to find a new home in the places they land. So the question I want to investigate tonight and try to answer is, how might we change the world so that migrants aren't demonized, turned away, attacked, and sometimes even killed? So I have to begin with an apology. I'm a philosopher, and philosophers don't give you answers. We ask questions. And so I'm asking you to please think along with me. As you hear the talk, think about what you think about these issues. What do you think needs to be done so that migrants would be welcomed? How would you change the world so that migrants would be welcome? I'm looking to learn from you because you're a lot younger than I am. And you have things to tell me about your situation. What is the state of your life right now? What might need to change in order for migrants to be welcomed? Good dialogue allows people, I come from Georgia College, and that's a place that's the state's public liberal arts college. And we try to have classes where we are discussion-based rather than lecture. So I'm hoping that we can have some discussion here after I'm finished tonight. So let me begin with a dream. Living in Georgia, we have learned from our homegrown hero, Dr. Martin Luther King, how to dream. King dared to dream of a world where children of different races would walk hand in hand to integrated schools. He then organized and worked to turn that dream into reality. And when you combine dreams with hard work and smart organizing, you can change the world. It's not that Dr. King's vision is really fully realized yet, but we still have the dream, and I think the obligation to try to make his dream a reality. So Americus is a very special place. I don't know much about it. It's the first time I'm here, but I know just a little bit about koinonia. And koinonia, I think, also must have begun with a dream. Living in Georgia, the founders of koinonia knew how to dream and to work. Who would have thought that a community founded in Americus in 1942, where black and white workers were treated equally, paid equally, and shared meals together, would still be here more than 80 years later. The community's ability to dream, organize, and work allowed it to withstand the bullets and bombs of the Ku Klux Klan and spread the love of everyone that is at the heart of the Christian faith. So, you heard a little bit about Harold Isaacs, and he certainly was somebody who knew how to dream as well. As Bonnie said, he founded the Association of Third World Studies, which has been renamed the Association of Global South Studies. Harold dreamed of fostering the study of the Global South in rural Georgia. His generous legacy makes this lecture possible. I didn't know Harold well, but I met him I met him a couple of times. I met him for the first time, really, at a conference at Berry College. And I didn't know many people at that conference. And Harold very generously came up and introduced himself to me and made me feel welcome. And this is quite a dream. This is really quite a thing that he's accomplished. It's wonderful that you have here at Georgia Southwestern the funds and his sort of guiding image, or his guiding vision of, hey, let's, in this small town in Georgia, let's learn about the whole world, and not just the Western world, but the non-Western world as well. So, given all these dreamers who have done great things, I tell you, I hope that you can dream too. I hope you can dream of a better world where migrants are treated better, and you can help make that dream with your organization, your organizational skills. You can help make that dream a reality. So we shouldn't start by getting discouraged. One of my heroes, John Lewis, who appears on the bottom of my email, says, it's really important not to get too discouraged. I think we should look first and see that a lot of good things are happening in the world. In the past 50 years, many people have risen out of poverty. More than 600 million in China alone have been lifted out of poverty since 1989. Birth rates have drastically reduced throughout almost all over the world. That's a wonderful thing. Women should not be having multitudes of children. It's terrible for their health. It's terrible for the kids. And birth rates have gone down in almost all countries across the world. There have been advances in medicine. We have effective treatments for AIDS and promising ways to counter malaria, one of the big killers in the third world. Of course, there's another dreamer from this area who's done a great deal to make this world healthier. Jimmy Carter had a dream that guinea worm could be eradicated, And in 1986, when he first dreamed that one could eradicate that disease, there were over 3.5 million people with guinea worm throughout the world. Last year, the Carter Center reported that there were only 4 cases of guinea worm found in this world. That's quite an amazing thing that somebody did who's very closely, I know, tied to this school. And you have a wonderful professor who can tell you all about all the great things he did. Still, we continue to see like wars, climate change, and we should not be surprised there are many migrants who are fleeing their homelands, many escaping terrible conditions. So let us dream that those fleeing poverty, the effects of climate change, political repression would be welcome, and given what it takes to start a new life. Now, many countries actually need migrants. How many of you knew that the birth rate in the United States is below two children per woman? How many of you knew that? A couple of you did. Well, that's a problem. It's a problem for many reasons. It's a problem because as a country ages, there are fewer people to support people like me. I paid my Social Security taxes so that I would support the generation before me. I need all of you to stay in school and do well and pay your taxes so that older people in this country have what they need to survive. So I want to start looking at why people choose to migrate. Right now, in the world, according to the Council on Foreign Relations, there are more than 304 million people across the world who live in a country where they weren't born. And migration has been steadily increasing since 2000. About 2.8% of the global population migrated away from their country in 2000. Today, it's more than 3.6% of the global population are migrants. Now, some migrants move because they're just interested in traveling and want to see other parts of the world. But many migrants move because they're looking to improve their economic situation or to flee from persecution. People in China and India and many other parts of the globe can get information in real time about migration routes and how to migrate. So more than 18 million people have left India. That is a large number, but a very small percentage of the total population of India. Many of these migrants have migrated to the United Arab Emirates. Fully 1/3 of that country is made up of migrants. In Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, many Indians have migrated to those countries, and they represent 1/4 of those countries' populations. And those migrants have done things like build these skyscrapers. They built the stadiums for the World Cup. There are many highly educated Indians who have come to the United States. Many Indian doctors, nurses, engineers, and tech sector workers have migrated to the United States. India provides more migrant doctors to the United States than any other country. And it's the second largest supplier of nurses. 1 out of every 5 doctors in the United States has migrated here from India. 26% of the registered nurses in the United States are from the Philippines, and India provides the second largest number of immigrant nurses. 6% of the nurses in the United States are from India. I doubt I have to convince the audience here that without migrant health workers, places like Americus would be much worse off. It's hard to attract people to rural Georgia to become healthcare workers, and often it's migrants who go. So a small percentage a large number, but a small percentage of people from India have migrated. But there are other countries where large numbers of people have migrated. 36% of Syrians have left their country. 30% of Venezuelans, 25.8% of people from the Ukraine. When you have such a large percentage of people leaving the country, people are obviously doing it because things are very bad in the place they're living. Most people never migrate and live outside the country of their origin. Most people want to remain in the country where they were born and live among their family and friends. Most Syrians left Syria because of a ruthless dictator and a brutal civil war. Most Syrians found refuge in neighboring countries. More than 5 million Syrians lived in neighboring countries like Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt. Lebanon, a small country of 4 million people, they took in almost 750,000 of refugees from Syria. According to a recent survey, 80% of the migrants want to return home, but there are good reasons why many are still afraid to do this. Very recently, there have been reports that the new government promised to protect minorities, but last summer it killed more than 2,000, mostly Druze, which is a small minority in Syria. Last summer, more than 2,000 Druze combatants and civilians were killed in a province called Sueda. So like I said, countries need migrants. And I don't think many people realize this, but it's a bad thing for a country when it stops losing, when the population starts declining. And you don't have to take my word for it. Central bankers from the European Union, Japan, and the UK have stated that migrant labor has played a key role in stabilizing their economies, and migrants will be needed for many decades. The Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City has recently made the same point. That bank said in a report released in March of this year that the United States population will be declining by 2033 unless we allow more migration. So Paul Krugman, who's Nobel Prize-winning economist, has also talked about why it is that migration has both short-term and long-term benefits. So immigration to the United States soared around 2022. More than 1 million people immigrated in that year. It was the highest number of immigrants till 2017. And in 2020, before COVID struck, the Congressional Budget Office estimated the US economy would add 2 million jobs over the next 3 years. So before COVID, they looked at the economy and said, we're going to have 2 million more jobs. But actually, the US added 3 million more jobs. And many of the jobs it added were in factories that were producing all the stuff that we started buying during COVID. During COVID, we couldn't go out to restaurants. So we sat at home and we ramped up our Amazon purchases, and suddenly factories were needed. They needed workers in factories to produce all that stuff we were buying. Prices went up during COVID and after that, but absent those migrant workers who went to work in the factories, in the meat packing plants, in the fields harvesting our crops, prices would have gone up even more. This week, I read an article about how the construction industry in the United States is being held back because many of the workers are undocumented. According to one estimate, 13% of the workers in the construction industry in the United States are undocumented. Another study suggested that the construction industry would need 500,000 more workers to meet current demands. Now, many of my students talk about how expensive housing is. So we need new housing. I don't know, is housing expensive here? Is it? My students talk about that. Milledgeville's not a big town either. But what'd you say? Yeah, it's gone up dramatically. People realize we need more houses. We need more housing. And if you get rid of all the undocumented workers, housing is going to be more expensive and it's going to be built much slower. I read in this article that from this week, there was a case in Chicago where a man was getting some renovations done on his house. They were replacing some windows and a few other things. ICE came, they raided it, and that stopped not only the construction on his house, it stopped the construction throughout the entire neighborhood. Do we really want to chase out construction workers right now? In the long term, there are benefits from migration are even clearer, according to Krugman. Immigrants tend to be young. They tend to be hardworking. They tend to be entrepreneurial. They will contribute to things like Social Security and Medicare for years before they need it. And there are places that are just full of migrants, which are really incredibly interesting places and fun places to be. New York City has a population where 36% of its citizens are residents are foreign-born. In Queens, one of the 5 boroughs, 47% of the residents are foreign-born. And anyone who knows New York City can attest the cultural diversity of that place is one of the parts of its allure. Migrants bring good things to the places they go. But there's clearly a backlash against migrants in many places, such as Greece, Eastern Europe, the European Union, Great Britain, South Africa, Chile, the United States, Australia, and Pakistan. It's hard to gauge public reaction to migration in other places like Jordan, Uganda, and Morocco, which have taken in many migrants, but have authoritarian governments that don't really let the public speak their mind. So why the backlash? So as I said, can you read this? Can you see it? There was a surge in migration in the United States even before Biden was elected in November of 2020. You can see in 2020, almost 500,000 migrants entered the United States. And in 2021, that number jumped to 1.734686. In 22, the highest level ever recorded, 2,378,994. Before this surge, most migrants were coming to the southern border were from Central America, places like Honduras and El Salvador. Does anybody know why people were coming from Honduras and El Salvador, like starting in 1914? Anybody have a guess? Those countries had some of the highest murder rates in the world. There was a lot of gang violence. And where do you think those gangs were getting their money? Partly from extortion of local people. But there was another place where they were getting a lot of the money, and that was from the drug trafficking. And where were those drugs headed? They were headed to the United States. During the surge in the 2020 to 2024, migrants started coming from other places, including Venezuela, Ecuador, Haiti, and some from India, China, and Turkey. In January 2025, there were 53.3 million migrants living in the United States, which was the highest number ever recorded. During the first 6 months of 2025, more than 1 million of those migrants had left the United States. The slowdown to the migrants had already started during the Biden administration. In June 2020, that should be 2024. In June 2024, Biden put in a new order which vastly reduced the number of people trying to enter the United States. Before this, At the height of the surge, there were many reports and pictures of families sleeping on the streets and aid organizations that were overwhelmed. For example, at one point, nearly 20,000 Haitian refugees descended on one town of the southern border. There were political consequences to this migration. In 2024, Trump captured 55% of the Latino vote in Texas. That represented a 13% increase from 2020. He also, in 2024, won 14 out of the 18 counties within 20 miles of the border. In 2016, he managed to win 29% of the vote in 4 counties from the Rio Grande. In 2024, he won all 4 counties. According to one Republican, the outcry against migrants was most acute in the counties with high poverty rates. That Republican operative said that the residents of those counties were more likely to feel that their community was being overrun by people who were even poorer and with greater needs. At the same time, many down-ballot Democrats managed to hold on to their positions. So Trump really capitalized on this migrant surge to ride his way back to the White House. And then in 2022, the governor of Texas, have you heard about this? He started taking migrants from the border and busing them to liberal cities like New York and Chicago. And other people copied him and did the same thing, and approximately 58,000 migrants were taken from the border and bused to cities. So the mayors of these cities started to claim that they were being inundated. Between the spring of 2022 to December of 2024, more than 200,000 migrants arrived in New York City. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, soon to be the ex-mayor, said that this was the first time in his life he had encountered a problem that he did not see an end to. I don't know about you, but I encounter problems all the time that I don't see an end to. Maybe you see quickly how you're going to solve all your problems. I don't. He said that the city was facing a budget gap of $12 billion, and that gap was exactly how much they needed for the migrants. There were reportedly 60,000 migrants in traditional city shelters and over 200 emergency sites. 20,000 migrant children were expected to show up in the city schools. But there are currently almost 1 million students in those city schools. 20,000 is a lot, but the school system is very big. New York has a right to shelter law, and the mayor is claiming that the city needed federal help to cope with the influx. Fair enough. The federal government should give money, I think, to help cities deal with the influx of people. Still, I can't help but question if migrants are really as much of a burden as Adams suggested. Another supposedly liberal person, and that's the governor of Illinois, named J.B. Pritzker, said that while he affirmed that every migrant who was fearing persecution, had a legitimate fear of persecution, had the right to move, he was saying that Chicago was being overwhelmed with migrants during this time. The city provided over $300 million in humanitarian aid. And the state provided $300 million, the city provided another $100 million. So even this somewhat liberal mayor was saying this is a huge problem. And at first I said, well, I dismissed what Pritzker was saying. I thought he was being kind of a drama queen. And one of the reasons that I think Pritzker, I mean, he's got some point that the federal government should help when you get that number of migrants. But Illinois in 2016 was only one of 7 states in the United States that had a negative growth rate. Only West Virginia had a higher negative growth rate. So Illinois is a state which is losing population. Those are states that need migrants. But look at what voters said. Many voters claimed that it was a problem. It's fine for an academic sitting in Georgia to say it's not a problem, but apparently a lot of voters disagreed with me. 82% said that the recent influx of migrants to the state of New York was a serious problem. 54 said it was a very serious problem. When large numbers of migrants arrive and sleep on the streets, there are bound to be problems. It is well documented that migrants commit crimes at much lower rates than native-born citizens. But some migrants do commit crimes, and when they do, the politicians use that to demonize all migrants. In addition, when there are encampments of homeless people, be they migrants or native-born, there can be problems with littering, things like littering and open defecation. Clearly, the solution is to get migrants and homeless people off the streets and into permanent housing. I'm wondering, do you see homeless people in Americas? Are there homeless people in Americas? I think, I see in Milledgeville's a small town, it's only 15,000, that's where I teach. And I see people who I strongly suspect are homeless. I think we need to give housing to everybody. This is a country that is way too wealthy to be a place that doesn't get people housing. And if there are so many people who are unhoused, there must be something wrong with the system. But not everybody's like Adams, the mayor of New York City. There are lots of mayors who say, bring them on, we need migrants. We don't even care if they have legal status or not. Because cities like Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh is a city where I happen to have been born. I migrated, I left there. But it lost nearly 160,000 manufacturing jobs and 300,000 residents. The city lost another 122,000 residents between 2000 and 2020. It lost over 100,000 residents in those 20 years. It's cold in Pittsburgh. we Georgians, we better not go there because we wouldn't survive in that cold. But it's a city that has a lot of potential, and the mayor says, there are businesses that want to expand, but they can't expand because they can't find the workers. So the mayor of Pittsburgh says, migrants are welcome here. Bring them, come. We need the workers. We need, they need young families with children for the schools. Even a cursory look at Pittsburgh history reveals that migrants were crucial to making Pittsburgh the wealthy manufacturing hub it once was. It is very unlikely that Pittsburgh will regain economic vitality absent new migrants. I would bet, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, people, you may know better than I, but I think South Georgia, like south of Macon, is a place that has lost a lot of population. Am I right about that? I think I'm right about that. Check it. Don't believe me, check me. So other communities, including Detroit, Dayton, Ohio, and Erie, Pennsylvania, all places that are experiencing population loss, have been working with outside experts on how to transform city services to meet the needs of immigrants. One city of Topeka, Kansas, is being even more aggressive, offering legal migrants up to $15,000 to move there. These Rust Belt towns need new residents, and their elected officials are not afraid to roll out the welcome mat. And it's not even, this is not a phenomenon just in the United States. So Turkey is a country where migrants are helping the economy. Because of the Syrian civil war, there were almost 2 million migrants who entered Turkey. And one study argued that they helped the economy by augmenting the demand for goods. That might have contributed in the short term to a rise in inflation and unemployment, but the authors of a study argued that if the migrants were able to find jobs, they would have a positive influence on the economy. Migrants know that they have to go find a job. Migrants can't rely on a social safety net. Another thing that happened in Turkey is some of those migrants who came started businesses. And they then would employ people who lived in Turkey. It's estimated that the migrants who came to Turkey invested $500 million in capital into Turkey. And if you look around, I think you'll see that right here, even in America, there are migrants who have come and invested in businesses right here in Americas, just the way they did in Turkey. And one often hears that migrants do the jobs that natives will not. In Turkey, it was reported that some of those migrants were working on farms and helping farmers increase their acreage that they were cultivating. It's certainly true in the United States, where migrants make up a large number of the people working in the very dangerous job of meatpacking. There are also migrants we rely on migrants to harvest our crops. Farmers, factory owners, and economists may be bullish on migration, but it seems that many of the citizens do not share their enthusiasm. A recent study found that only 24.4% of the Turks supported migration. The article claimed that Turkey was the least supportive of immigration of all the countries they surveyed. So why the backlash? One of the main reasons, I think, for the backlash against migrants that we're seeing in the United States and Europe, and other countries as well, is that many native people in these countries are suffering. In the summer of 2024, I was in Greece on the beautiful island of Naxos. In between some great meals and some swims, I was finishing a book and writing a paper on migration. Greece needs immigrants. Starting in 2009, the Greeks suffered a severe economic crisis, and it lasted for 10 years. Many, many Greeks left the country. Today in Greece, there are migrants doing constructions and working in hotels and restaurants because a lot of the young people from Greece have left. And it's hard work that a lot of people don't want to do. During the summer of 2024, I talked about migrants with a woman who owned a business renting cars and vans to tourists. On the one hand, she said that Greece had a long tradition of welcoming foreigners. She pointed out that ancient Greek literature underlined the importance of welcoming the stranger. She also admitted that Greece needed workers. Greece needed workers to build new housing, and Greece needed foreigners to operate restaurants and hotels. I saw many workers from Pakistan on Naxos. These workers from Pakistan were working on construction and also in the restaurants. I heard one owner of an olive orchard on Naxos who said that when the olives needed to be harvested, and Greece is known for its olives, there were no Greeks to do it. And so she called Athens, and there were a group of Indians who came. Every year it was Indians who were now harvesting the olives. Even though the owner of the rental car company admitted Greece needed foreign workers, she then claimed that the current government was doing more for the migrants than they were doing for the Greeks. She said the young Greeks could not find housing and the healthcare system was not caring for the Greeks who were sick. She said the government needed to do more for the Greeks and less for the migrants. Now, as I said, Greece has gone through terrible economic times, really, really bad. Much worse than anything we've seen here. There was a rise in the death rate. In 2016, at a time when death rates were falling throughout most of the world, they rose in Greece. Most of this happened after 2010. One reporter said, I'm going to translate this into language you understand. How bad were things in Greece? They said, Many new babies born were dying of treatable conditions. There was an increased rate of youth suicides. Young people and adults were also dying because of poor diets, alcohol abuse, smoking, and preventable diseases. Greece was forced by the European Union to drastically cut its healthcare spending. Hospitals were short on supply. A Forbes article compared the shortages found in the healthcare system to shortages typically found in war-zone hospitals. In short, the response to economic devastation is not so different between Georgia, Appalachia, and Greece. Greek young people are migrating in large numbers, as are the youth of southern Georgia, I think. It's also not surprising the rise of the neo-fascist party Golden Dawn in Greece accompanied these austerity policies. I doubt the business owners claim that the government was doing more for the migrants than they were for Greek citizens, but there's no doubt that Greek citizens went through very rough times. So, in 2016, in the 2024 elections in the United States were a powerful testament to the sway of appeals against migrants. We were living, as one person put it, in an age of anger. I think this age of anger is rooted in the failure of many countries to provide for its own citizens. Instead of closing borders, I'd like to see reforms to the economic order that has led to so much economic duress in the United States. If we acknowledge and work to change the conditions that have left so many in desperate shape in the United States, then the demagogues' anti-immigrants' appeals will lose most of their potency. By some measures, the United States economy is doing well, but I think everybody in this room probably knows some people are doing really well right now in the United States, but a lot of people aren't. According to a recent survey, 64% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. If not always, at least they live paycheck to paycheck sometimes. 46% of Americans say they live paycheck to paycheck all the time. Housing, medical care, child care, and education are all very expensive in the United States. So only 22% of Americans say they have no problems paying their bill each month. Baby boomers have more wealth, but still, only 37% of my generation says they have no problems paying their monthly bills. Only 19% of Gen Zers, only 19% of, I imagine most of you are Gen Z, right? Does that statistic surprise you, that only 19% of your generation says that you have no problems paying your monthly bills? Or does that sort of correspond with what you see and feel? Take a little solace. It's even worse among the millennials. 16% of the millennials say they pay their monthly bills without difficulty, only 16%. How do you feel life's going for your generation? Is it tough out there? Is your generation facing a lot of problems? Economic problems? I see a lot of heads nodding yes. We can talk about that maybe some more in the discussion period.
This might be a good time for some Q&A, if there's any.
Yeah, or comments.
Does anybody have any questions or comments so far? I'd like to ask Dr. Winchester.
Yes. Those are fine. I think you have to treat all people with dignity. So if people are here working hard, contributing to the system, there should be a path to citizenship. We shouldn't just say, come here, work hard, help us out, and then just go die someplace else. Absolutely. I think we owe it to the people who are working here, helping us out. We owe them a decent life. Absolutely. Maybe that's why I started by saying we have to dream. I'm not saying that there's a clear path to this right now, but at least I think you have to start by dreaming. You have to imagine a better world and not get, as John Lewis said, not get pessimistic about it. You have to dream of a better world. You have to work to make it happen. You have to organize and figure out how you can make it happen. Yeah. Yes. That's a great question. I'm not sure if everybody heard it. The question, what effect would increased migration have on the environment? A lot of people are saying, like, the world can barely support the number of people there are now. And so what kind of effect would it have on the environment? Fair enough. I think we have to probably get out of this mindset of it's like, bigger is always better. But I think it's a good thing that the population isn't keeping exploding. It's a great thing that population rates have come down all over the world. But you need a certain number of people in order to produce the goods that we need, in order to, care for people. And so I think we're already on a rate where we can sustain the number of people that there are in the world. I think this world can sustain the number of people we have now, and maybe even some more. And I'm not the only one, this is not my specialty, but people like Amartya Sen, a very famous Indian economist, has said that we're not at a point where the earth is going to run out of food. But we do have to be a lot smarter about how we produce our energy, how we transport our transport system. How many people realize this is one of the biggest contributors to global warming is the eating of meat. We raise billions and billions of animals and slaughter them, and that's a very inefficient way to feed people. Those animals consume an enormous amount of grain, which then costs a lot in environmental degradation to produce all that grain. So I think it's a very good question. It's a fair question, but I think my hope is that we can support about the number of people we have on the planet right now, and we can at the same time become a lot more environmentally conscious and live in ways that protect the earth. I might be wrong about that. That's my hope. Yeah, I see two hands. I think yours was first.
I know you're very pro-migration, pro-immigration. Do you think there should be limits on that, on migration, and if so, what limits do you think should be?
Great question. It's a question. It's a very good question, and I think politically, when you have masses of migration, you have a backlash. When people saw people on the street, sleeping on the street, or at the border, there were pictures during that migration surge from 2020 to 2024. There were pictures of all these people overwhelming the border. So I think there is a need to do migration. That's not good for the migrants either. A lot of those migrants, have you ever heard of the Darien Gap? The Darien Gap goes through Panama. And a lot of these migrants were taking this very, very dangerous trek through the Darien Gap, there were gangs who were attacking the migrants. It was a horrible situation. And I don't want to see, no one should have to go through the Darien Gap to try to come to this country. But I think there are so many ways we could do migration humanely. And I think also sometimes there's things we could do to make conditions in those countries better so people don't need to migrate. Okay, and often the interests of the migrants and our interests are aligned. Now, who doesn't like candy? Did you know that candy in our country is more expensive than other countries? Go up to Canada, and well, they have taxes. But we have candy is expensive here because sugar is expensive. And why is sugar expensive? Because we vastly limit the amount of sugar that can come in from places like Central America, where they can grow it much more economically. But why don't we import sugar? Why do we have big sugar plantations here, even though it's expensive to grow sugar here? Because you have a very wealthy, powerful family that controls the sugar industry, and they make sure that the amount of sugar coming in from someplace else is limited. So it could be a win-win situation. If we take on those interests, those interests that make our life difficult here, this wealth that makes our life difficult, it would be better for us. And then Central America would be wealthier, and people wouldn't feel the need to migrate. I've sort of gone around your question, but I guess if push comes to shove, I do think we need to have orderly migration. People should not be walking through the Darien Gap.
Do you think there should be any filtering of the people that come in?
We do that already.
Yeah,
We-
and do you agree with that?
Sure. There's no reason why we don't, not everybody has to be let in. The migrants tend to be much more law-abiding than U.S. citizens, but that doesn't mean that they're all perfect. Yeah. Thank you for that question. There was a hand back here, yeah.
So it's very clear that we're all like native folks and people who migrate here are facing problems. How would you explain to someone who is native and thinks that migrants are causing these problems, that migrants are the problem? How do you want them to see like make sure that racism?
I was hoping you could help me with that. I told you I didn't have the answers. I'm a philosopher. I raise questions. I don't have all the answers. So I don't know. Do you have some ideas about that? Oh. Yeah. Does anybody else have some ideas about that? You have an idea? No. Does anybody else? Okay. This talk I'm giving tonight, I'm trying to give you information. I'm hoping that maybe you learn something from here about the value of migration. I think that's not widely known. I'm a professor. What I can do is I can teach my students and people in lectures about the values of migration. I think knowledge has to get out there, and a lot of the knowledge isn't out there. Many people don't know that we have a declining birth rate and how bad that can be, how hard that can be for a country. A place like Japan is really in trouble because they have so many old people and so few young people. Small towns in Japan are like empty. They're ghost towns. Houses are sitting there and rotting because there's nobody to see. So my first response is get the information out there. Learn more about it. Try to have discussions. Another thing, my sister does not share my political views. And she asked me about 6 months ago, she said, Jim, what do we think now this was a little bit longer ago, this was when there were lots of migrants down on the border. What do you think we should do? And I said, I don't know, Julie, what do you think we should do? I didn't want to get in a political discussion with her right there in that moment. And she said, I think we should open the gates and let them all in. And I was surprised. A good thing I was sitting down. I was surprised my sister said that. But she knows some families, like the people that cut her grass are migrants. And she knows what good people those are. She's spent a lot of, she knows their kids, she buys Girl Scout cookies from their daughters. And I think that makes a big difference when people get to know migrants, and then it's a lot harder to demonize them. But let me know if you get other ideas. Or anybody else. Yeah, I think there was a hand here and then in the back.
Yeah, I think a lot of our generation sort of disabling institutions that regulate all of these problems.
Uh-huh.
And I'm curious what you think the answer is for us to look at places we can look to. You mentioned places like Crimea, all of these places I feel like fought against the institutions and really worked with the system.
Yeah.
How do you experience we as a generation?
Yeah, you have to make your voices heard, right? Your generation doesn't vote in the same numbers as my generation. I often hear people say, well, Social Security is not going to be around for us. I'm pretty confident that my generation, both left and right, votes at high enough numbers that if they try to cut Social Security, politicians are going to pay a price. You know, if you guys vote, if you guys can get out and vote, I think your tuition would be lower. I think they'd do something about housing. I mean, I applaud these other organizations too. I think there's a role for all of them. But I would say you got to get out and vote. You got to be organized. And you got to be aware of what's going on. A lot of times politicians do things and nobody even knows, nobody's aware of what they're doing. I don't know, those are some of my ideas. What about you? You have other ideas?
I mean, I'm pretty disillusioned with the systems.
Yes.
I'm not convinced that we're going to put in the system to solve the issue. So places like Crimea,
Yeah.
that's just
You know, I think there are people out there that are trying to make you disillusioned. And if you, like, if they disillusion you to such an extent that you stay home on the couch and don't do anything, they win. I don't know. It seems like every time I canvass for a political candidate, they lose. So maybe I need to go canvass for the people I don't want to win. I don't know. But at least I feel like when I canvass for somebody and they lose, at least I tried. And, you're going to have ups and downs. And you got to, like, there are moments when good things happen. Look at, the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. People tried for decades to get something like that happening. Is it perfect? No. Can it be made better? Absolutely. But it got passed. I think, what must it have been like for somebody like Martin Luther King and the other civil rights leaders to dream of, like, that they could do something about prejudice and discrimination in the South when they started doing it in the 1950s, right? Who would have thought that anything could have been done? And things are far from perfect, but they're better from the time when we lived in the 1940s and 50s, and there were regular lynchings and all sorts of other horrible things that were happening. Yeah. Hi. Yeah, good question. Thanks for asking it. I think immigrants are coming for a lot of different reasons, right? And again, I think most people don't want to leave their home, right? Why like leave your home? Why leave your family and your friends, the place that you know? Even, you know, I think 1 million Syrians have gone back to Syria since the fall of the regime 9 months ago. And Syria is a dicey place to be, but people go back. But I think I admire the spirit of somebody who says, I want to see someplace else. I want to try someplace else. Some migrants, I think, migrate simply because they have a joy of seeing the world. And, you know, they do so much. Migrants bring such an incredible vitality to the places where they come. You know, thank goodness for those doctors. Like 20% of our doctors are people who, you know, that's a real drain for India. These people are educated in India, and then after all that education, they come here and they give us health service here. That's a real loss for India. But, you know, thank goodness, because we need doctors in this country. We don't have enough doctors. So I think, you know, a lot of migrants go because they really have to. Like they're facing, you know, Assad in Syria that was an absolutely brutal civil war. People left. You know, Venezuela is a really tough situation right now. People are leaving Venezuela because it just economically is devastated, and the dictatorship was bad. They come for a lot of different reasons, I think. Am I out of time? Go ahead. Most big cities have. Yeah. I think those politicians had a fear. They saw how Trump really used migration very effective politically. Like, Trump voters still talk about the economy is number one, Trump voters say immigrants are number two. So he really did, he used that as a weapon. And so I think somebody like Pritzker, this supposedly liberal governor of Illinois, he was afraid of the political fallout that he was going to get. People in the streets, I don't know, many of them are migrants. I mean, I think, you know, it's wonderful that in the US, we could have a Muslim American man win the governor, become mayor of the city of New York. What is he, 34 years old? He seems like a really dynamic, interesting person. Think of how lucky we are to have somebody of that caliber who's chosen to like live in the United States. You know, Obama. I mean, how lucky are we to have somebody as talented as Obama, you know, with an immigrant father who then comes and does amazing things for the place he lands. I think a lot of normal people, like my sister, she meets the people, she really gets to know some migrants, and she realizes, let them all in. I was going to fall off my chair when my sister told me that. I don't know. Maybe I'm too optimistic. Maybe there's another side to it. There's one question here I'd like to answer, and then I'll let you go, because it's really nice that you came out. You could be sitting at home, like in your easy chair, and you're here, so I don't want to keep you too much longer. But I want to tell you one more positive thing that I'll say it really brief. But go ahead. Why don't you ask your question? Was I talking about?
You were saying that how one group was very, had a big hold on the sugar industry.
Oh, they're very, look it up. look it up on it's a very powerful, wealthy family that basically controls the sugar industry in the United States. And they make sure that cheaper sugar doesn't come in from places like Central America. And it has all sorts of ripple effects. Like, for instance, many candy factories are set up in Canada because sugar is so expensive in this country. And so, check it. It's crony capitalism. That should never happen. So, because I'm a hopeless optimist, you should check out Germany. Germany accepted 1.5 million Syrian refugees. And they did that, I believe, they started coming in 2015, 2016. And now, 10 years later, these Syrian refugees are working at the same rate as Germans. And something like 56% of the Germans have in some way helped the integration of these refugees into German society. And again, because why was it done? I think it was done in part because Germany also has a declining birth rate. There are just more and more older people, and there are not enough younger people to support them. And so Germany has pretty successfully incorporated 1.5 million refugees in a country that's much smaller than ours. It's a population of about 100 million, maybe 110 million, something like that. So other countries are doing this, and I think if we get, who asked the question about how do we do this, I think we need to spread of how useful how important, I hate to say useful, how these migrants can really add to our country. And well, thank you for listening, and I really enjoyed this. Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's great to see you.